Hey, good evening everyone. Sorry to keep you and being a few minutes late. So, the last week or so, we're doing a lot of open source kind of suggestions and coding and looking at Dashboard Hub. So what I wanted to do today was actually, and you can see a retweet on my camera at the back because that's my iPad Pro, something I should turn off notifications when I am streaming. So next time. Any suggestions you have, do comment and do say. But what I wanted to do today, it's Wednesday, it's midweek, I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and I thought we could talk about design patterns. And not design patterns in terms of UI design, but in terms of coding design. So I'm sure you've all come across it before. You've probably used frameworks like Ruby on Rails, Spring for Java, or Symfony or Zen for PHP, or Angular. There's so many, I'm trying to think of more names, but there are lots. And most of them follow the MVC or MVVM, and that's a design pattern which is Model View Controller. And it's a design pattern we actually don't write that often, so I'm not going to talk about that design pattern. There's lots of information out there already. But what I do want to talk about is design patterns that are core design patterns that are quite small, and it's something we probably use on a regular basis in our coding. Some people I know use quite a few of those patterns but don't actually realize the name of it, that they're actually using it. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through some examples. So this website on the screen is called SourceMaking. It's over the years it's been a really good resource to learning design patterns, and like I said, it's coding design patterns. And so they have various other things, but I'm going to focus on their design patterns. And design patterns usually fall into three sections. You have the creational, the structural, and behavioral, and these aren't a full list of all the design patterns. There are lots. Originally there was a book called The Gang of Four, where I think they had about 30 or 40 design patterns, and over the years people have built on it. So some of them are probably here, and it also has some additional ones that aren't in that book as well. If you do have any questions, do just jump in and ask. If you have any suggestions, do let me know as well. So one of the design patterns that I use a lot, and I think some people do use it or partially use it without realizing, so I want to kind of make it crystal clear in how to use it. So if we go down to the structural design pattern, there's one down here called right at the top called adapter. And in our real life, we actually use the adapter pattern a lot. When you go traveling abroad and you have your iPhone charger or your laptop charger, and you've got your plug that fits your country. When you go to a foreign country, you have an adapter that will allow you to use your plug in another country. And you can even kind of get one of those multi ones where you flick out the right country. So that's kind of what the adapter pattern's like, and what I want to show. So a few more people have joined, so I just want to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. I did put a tweet out today saying we're going to be talking about design patterns, so hopefully that has encouraged a few to join and hasn't scared people off. I know a lot of people confuse it for UI design. So I'm not going to read through this. You can have a look at this online, so sourcemaking.com, really good resource. They have, if I scroll all the way down, and we'll come back to the diagram in a second, but if I scroll all the way down, they have examples in various languages: Java, C++, PHP. I didn't realize Delphi was still around, but it probably is. And Python, which is a very popular language. I'll scroll all the way back up to the top. We will do a coding example in a minute with this, so nice and simple, and we'll build on it. And we'll also see how people try and solve the problem that the adapter design pattern is trying to solve, but in a roundabout way, and they actually make their life more complicated. And especially in the future, when you build on it and you need more adapters, it gets very complex and convoluted. So the adapter pattern is really clean and concise, and you can unit test each adapter individually and together. So like I said, I'm not going to read this. A good example, I think the wrench is a really, really good example. I actually thought last time I looked on the site, they actually used the the travel plug idea, but the wrench. So or ratchet, not wrench, ratchet. And then you have the adapter and the various sockets. So, and this site does have a checklist, because with the design patterns there are overlaps between them. So it's depending what problem you're trying to solve. Hey Jez, thanks for joining. So Jez is an awesome developer, and I'm sure he's going to comment lots on what I'm going to talk about, and it will be all good feedback. So okay, so then it gives you rules of thumb as well with using the adapter pattern. So you know, how it overlaps with the bridge, with the facade, and so forth. So let's look at some examples. So I'm actually going to go to the TypeScript playground, because ignore the panel on the right. It's just what TypeScript transpiles to into JavaScript, but we're not worrying about that. So I'm actually going to okay, we can leave this. So this is just when you load the page. This is the example that comes up with. So this is not anything I've written. So we are going to chop and change it. So funny enough, it does say output adapter. Is this something I wrote last time? Maybe it remembered. I think it is actually. Okay, that's fine. We will. This was one of the examples I was actually going to give. But so to give an example of where an adapter pattern might get used, if I just switch to my screens, so you don't get distracted by the code just yet. So where you would use the adapter pattern is in a coding situation, is where if you wanted to say transform some data, say you had some data in your domain model, and you wanted to say sometimes I need it as CSV, sometimes I need it as JSON, sometimes I need it as XML, if anyone uses XML nowadays. Sorry Java people, you probably do still use it. Yes, if you want to output it, the way a lot of people would do this, and I'm going to delete a lot of this. If I go back to my screen, I delete a lot of this, and then we'll just write have a simple class. Actually, you know what? Let's start completely from scratch. So if we said class and we just said, I don't know, output, and we create a class. If a lot of people wanted different outputs, they might say, I don't know, JSON, and they'll say, send me the data, and then they'll do something here, format into JSON. Hey Slayer Darth, thanks for joining again. Thanks for your continuous support. It's good to have you here. So we were just talking about design patterns, and I'm actually going into an example of the adapter pattern. And what I'm doing in this example right now is how a lot of people solve the problem, but actually the adapter pattern makes it easier. So if I have it, so you have some output and you get some data. Actually, let's make a constructor. Nice. Okay. Well, you have to. We'll write down what your idea is if you can share it. It's open source projects, so I'm sure you don't mind sharing it. I'll be interested to know. I've got a list of open source projects that I want to do, and yeah, they're kind of, there's a big queue. I'm trying to work my way through them, but I wouldn't mind doing like a whole weekend stream and trying to build one of the projects. Maybe only a prototype, but yeah, to do that. So I wonder if it's some overlap with yours. So let's have a constructor, and let's just say it's private and data. Why is that not happy? Private type is only allowed in the constructor implementation. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Well, again, this is like more pseudocode, so forget the TypeScript specific coding. So if we, so let's go, so data. So we've got data, and so therefore we don't pass it into here. And so data comes into the class, and then we might have an output in JSON, and we might have an output in CSV. So format into CSV. And this is where a lot of people solve this problem. npm package for deploying files to a remote server over FTP, FTP. I could check with Git to see which files have been modified, which ones are get ignored, etc. Yeah, that's true. Are there a lot of people still deploying over FTP and SFTP? I know over the years people have trying to move away from it, but I guess with shared hosting they probably do, which I think is how we got into this conversation last time actually. Have you done any research to see if there's anything else out there already, or similar? So if we output in JSON, CSV, what other else can we output as? We can output as XML. So format. I should put a comment. Format into XML. Okay. Yeah, I think it's largely how much the client's willing to spend. I don't know why I'm reading out the chat. Everyone can see the chat. It's on the screen. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I'm sure there's a lot of agencies that do the same as well. So we can output a JSON, CSV, and say that's what we're building for now as our product. But you know, a month down the line, someone might say, "Hey, I need some more." So they might say, "I don't know what's on the format. I can't even think." Tab, CSV. So take tab separated. So this can be comma separated. Comma separated CSV, tab CSV. So again, you know, we're going to keep adding to this, and there's nothing wrong with this. Into CSV, into tab CSV. So there's nothing wrong with this, but as you add to it, it's going to get more and more complicated. So format into comma CSV. So again, we've added another output kind of type, but this file's growing. We don't know how big each one of these methods are. And then what happens if there is some commonality or stuff you want to abstract out? Then you might say, okay, so this might be, let's just put public in front of these, so it can be accessed outside the class. But what happens if, say, the JSON needs something, we want to abstract it out because it gets used a few times within that method. So you might say private JSON nesting or something. And then you've got another kind of private method for JSON function, for JSON. So, you know, you start adding to this and it starts getting bigger and more complicated, and this class becomes, you know, no one wants to change it. It becomes really hard to use, to understand what's going on, and it becomes harder to test it, and it just gets more and more complicated. So, afternoon Venzra, good evening, thanks for joining. So this is also, Venzra is going to correct me in lots of stuff. So what you've missed, Venzra, just to give you a heads up so you know kind of where I've got to. I know you know all this stuff, but just so you know where I've got to. I did bring up the source making website, which I know we do use quite often. And I did talk about, briefly about, Jez, you subscribed with your Amazon Prime. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You're my first subscriber. So thank you very much. That's awesome. I'm actually really excited. So just waiting for Venzra to subscribe now as well. And so yeah, I was talking about how the adapter pattern we use in real life with plugs when you go traveling, or with a ratchet was the example in source making. And then the example I said was, and I give an example now on the screen which you can see, which is how most people solve this problem, but it's not great because the class just gets bigger and bigger, and as you want to abstract parts out of certain methods, then you kind of have these private methods that are not shared by all of them, or they're not really used by all of them, and it gets really big and messy and no one wants to change it and hard to test. Thanks, Jez. Really appreciate your support. Has anyone noticed a different cap today as well? Let me put it on the bigger one. My Linux cap. No one noticed that. I should give extra points if people notice if I'm wearing a different cap. So yesterday was my Ubuntu one. Okay, so this is the way a lot of people solve it, and I really don't like this way. I mean, I've seen worse ways. I've seen people do stuff like this. If we just move this down, I've seen people to do stuff like this. Public, just say output or run. And they do stuff like, I don't know, an if statement. So if, I don't know, something like this, type, type's probably a reserved word, format. So if format, you could use a switch here, which I prefer, but I'm just trying to use an example. If format is JSON, then so format into JSON. So I've seen this, and then you might have an else if, and then you'll do the XML. I'm not going to go through each output that I mentioned below, but then this grows, and this is probably the way I've seen it the most. And then when people go, oh, that's actually not quite a good idea, let me do something like this one below, where you've got different functions. Again, that's a step in the right direction, but it's still not right. We can actually make this easier and better. So that's what I'm going to show. So what we'll do is if I delete this now and make this a bit smaller. So what we would do here, for example, and I have dropped the types off on some of this because I don't know what they are. But again, it's a bit more of a pseudocode. I recognize the Fosdem jumper. Cool, yeah. Fosdem again, next year. Tickets, dates are released. So I almost read as ruined. Which bit is ruined? Sorry, I'm lost. Oh, ruining such an awesome channel. Okay, I got you. Okay, so the way to do this properly is the output might have, I don't know, again, we can call it run. So public run, not fun. Well, it is fun, but we can just say run. And what we would want is we would want the actual, another class that does the formatting to get injected in. So we would also create an interface, and I'll come to that in a second. So if we go create another class, and if we just say it's the JSON class, and we will do this. So we will say public run, and it will get the data, say. And again, you can do it on the constructor. There are a few things that can be done. So run, and then it will be format to JSON. So this is a bit better. So we've got this does the formatting, but it won't be doing any of the writing or anything like that, or the usage. So when we have another one of these, so if we created an XML one, so format to XML, but we wouldn't use these directly. We would still use the output or the formatter. Formatter is probably a better name. Formatter, and but with these classes growing, we need to make sure they all conform to the right signature, the right standard. So what we would do is we'd create an interface. So we would create an interface with a lowercase I, and we would say interface formatter adapter. And so if people don't know what interface is, an interface describes the class signature but doesn't actually have any of the implementation. Only the class that is implementing the interface defines the actual concrete implementation, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. But if you do have any questions, do just jump in and ask. So here we would say we would want a public run method, and it's expecting data. And with, oh no, you can't put public on there, can you? So data, we can make, it will be the whatever format data coming in. I don't know if it's your domain model or an array or something like that. So I'm just going to leave it as nothing for now, no type. But the return type's important. So we will say, because let's keep it simple for now. I don't want to get into too much actually. We've got time at the end and people want to see more, we can do more. So we've now got this JSON. So now we need this JSON class to implement, I can't even spell, implement the formatter. So formatter adapter even. So the reason for that is now if we don't have this function, it underlines it and it will say, you know, you're missing this run method. So we know that we're going to construct our adapter implementation, the concrete implementation correctly. And then same with the XML one, because they might call it, rather than run, they might call it output. can't even spell, output. And then when it's used in this class later on, it's not consistent. So we will call it run. And if we, again, I'm going to copy this for cheating. We know that it must conform to the same input and outputs and the same signatures. So now if we go to the, I say so a lot, no one said anything, but I use but now, but if we go now to the class formatter, we can then say that when we, the data comes in, but also we can ask for an adapter as well. So we could say, if I put data in as a second parameter, we can also say in here that we're expecting the adapter. But we can also say, I use but again, okay. Looking at the code, we can also say what format we want, and we don't know if it's going to be XML or if it's going to be JSON or any future formatters. So what we would do is we would just put the interface. So So now, again, at least I'm not saying, well, I hope I'm not. I haven't paid attention to that. Every time I say so or write in the comment, please. I need to get better at not doing that. Now the formatter, what we would use, needs an adapter injected in, and it must have this interface. So it can't be any other class. But again, if we make any new classes in the future, we need some new output. Then we can, as long as we implement the formatter adapter, which is an interface, it will be fine and accept it. And then in the run, we could do, okay, we call it run up here as well, but let's just say this is output just to make it a bit different. Then in here, we could do, say, oh, we need another class variable again. Adapter. So I use so. No one wrote anything in the chat. We can go this adapter dot run, and then inside here we can go this data, because we have, as a class property, we have data, and whatever the adapter is, I almost said so, I stopped myself there. So when we create the formatter class, we have to inject two things from the constructor. We have to inject an adapter and data. So, damn it. When we inject the adapter, it can be the JSON one, and we can also do also the data. I don't have any data, but I'm just going to do empty array. Why does it not like that? Expected 0 arguments, but got 2. Hey, Sucks! I can't pronounce your username. Sucksy, is that correct? Thank you very much for joining. I really, really appreciate it. I was watching your stream. Was it this morning? Last night? My day, my last 48 hours, a bit of a blur. And really glad you're keeping up with the coding and your coding journey, and you're sharing, you're streaming your learning. I think that's really awesome, really important. And I've told a few people about you already who are also learning to code that they should watch your stream. There are 4 of you. Yeah, there's probably too many cameras actually. If I could show you kind of it in all its glory. Okay, that screen is off because otherwise it's a bit of a distraction for me. But yes, there are too many. I should probably turn off some of these cameras. Although the other day we did have a suggestion from one of the viewers to put a camera right at the top, above the top screen pointing down, and you get a better view of my hat. But I think that's a bit too much. But yeah, thanks for joining. What we're talking about, I know you're getting into coding, so I don't want to bore you too much, but we're talking about design patterns, and we're not and design patterns aren't, I said why is no one writing anything in the chat? It's the 2 words I cannot say are so and You need to get better at this. I almost said so then. We're talking about design patterns that aren't UI design, aren't like, you know, the button or layout. Is actually a coding design, and we're talking about different outputs. Imagine having an adapter when you go traveling. You have your plug for your computer or your tablet, and it's in your country's adapter. and when you go to a different country, they'll have a different format, and you can just swap out the adapters. So this is what we're doing, and why is this not working? Okay, expected 0. Have I spelled constructor wrong? No, that's correct. Format constructor. That looks okay. So my attention is divided. Setting up a new project locally. Okay, no problem. You do both. Open source coding is most important. So yeah, you keep doing that, and then if you hear anything that sparks your interest, do give me a shout, and we can chat more about it. So Venzra, I know you're a TypeScript person, so why? I knew I should have done some Java. Why is that not happy with that? Expected 0 arguments, but got 2. See, even after 14 years of development, we still make mistakes, and we still have to debug some stuff, and it's just, you know, part and parcel of what we do. So I said so. Damn it. I shouldn't say so, but it happens all the time. Constructor. Oh, thank you. I'm gonna try and pronounce your username, Fraxure. Thank you so much for that. I'm glad to see someone's paying attention. Jez, where were you on this? And everyone else. But no, thank you very much. That was quite embarrassing, but I think it shows a good point that, you know, after, like I said, 14 years of doing Java, PHP, JavaScript, and all sorts of languages, you still make mistakes. And it's important to pair with people and learn from it. I hopefully won't make that mistake in such a hurry again, but it's important. Yes, open source coding really helps and get better at this sort of stuff. So I said so. No one wrote so in the chat. Right. So that's happy. I said so again. Damn it. So the format is happy to accept a JSON. So damn it. I said so. And if I could change that to XML, so I could put XML in there, and again, it wouldn't throw an error and it would be happy. But if I create another class, actually I won't copy that, let's write another one. So what's another output? We could say CSV, and we won't say it implements the adapter. We will just, you know, say public run, and we'll keep it the same. We'll keep it the same. Format to CSV. And if I put it here, CSV here, to actually come use this adapter, it doesn't complain. That's interesting. It doesn't implement that interface. I knew I should have done it in Java. But my point is that this should only accept, I think TypeScript was a really bad language to use. But again, it's a learning curve, so I think it's important. So in the adapter, it should only expect any class that implements this interface, and the CSV doesn't, because there's no way to guarantee that the signature inside, because this could just be output. And now it's woken up and thrown the error. So argument type of CSV is not assignable to parameter of T, format or adapter. Okay, so it doesn't like it because I don't implement the interface. When I come to use the formatter object and I pass in something that doesn't satisfy this property, then it's not gonna like it. So what we can do is we can then implement this. And can anyone tell me what's gonna happen now? Well, I've kind of pasted it and you can see the red underline already. But now I've implemented this, it's gonna say that I don't satisfy the interface's signature. So now it's gonna say, well, I've got output, but when it came down to here to do adapter.run, the run method wouldn't exist. So I'll have to then fix this to say run, and then now everything's happy again. So using types is really good if the language supports it, but also the adapter pattern allows you to add, I could have as many of these as I wanted, and when I come to use the object, I would just pass it in and pass in the data, and I know it would work and do the same thing because each adapter has to conform to the same signature. And I would make the signature more strict. I would, so on the interface, what I would do is maybe say it's an array, and possibly the return type of that function might be an array or certain things and so on. But I'm just keeping it simple for now. So that's the adapter pattern in about 30 minutes. Does that kind of make sense? I guess just to recap for any new people that have joined, is there are, if I go back, so this website, Source Making, is really good for design patterns. It groups them into creational, structural, and behavioral. And they are really useful. And you probably use some of these without even realizing. If you're using a framework, like an MVC framework, like Ruby on Rails, or Symfony or Zen for PHP, or I can't think some other ones. But you probably use the Singleton without even realizing. And the Singleton makes sure you get the same object back every time, so the object can keep state. And when you use it the second time, the class variables still have their state. And your framework does a lot of that for you, so you probably don't have to worry too much about that. Same with object pooling. You probably object pool your connections to a database, and same with prototyping. And you probably get a lot of these creational ones out of a framework already. But the structural ones is what you would use in your code when writing your business logic for your project. So worth having a look at this. It is definitely worth having a read and seeing and just try and once a month learn one. People use them as interview questions as well. It's always interesting to see if people are aware of design patterns. You don't want to go crazy and do everything as a design pattern. I've seen some people who go crazy over design patterns, and every bit of code has to be a design pattern, and then I'll switch to this so you can kind of see me stressing. Every bit of code has to be a design pattern, and then the collection of design patterns to be wrapped by another design pattern. And it's like, whoa, slow down. When it makes sense to use it, if it's something small and simple, don't overcomplicate it. But when it comes to common things like formatting the data in multiple ways, or writing the data to multiple sources, be it an API, be it disk, be it console log, again, adapter would make sense for those. But if you're using an ORM, you're probably using a proxy design pattern without realizing. I did see it somewhere here. Or a facade, you'll be using that. And decorators, in Java they use decorators a lot, and actually in TypeScript as well. So you'll be using a lot of these without realizing, and you don't need to understand all of them, but the ones that come up again and again, it's good to be aware of them. And yeah, definitely, so make yourself familiar with kind of what they mean and roughly what they do. They do have good examples in here with diagrams and even class diagrams to see how they would work, and gives you an example. And a checklist, because there are overlap. So you will have discussions with other techies, other developers, and they'll say, but I want to use this design pattern, and someone else will want to use this one. You've got to think which one kind of solves the problem the best. And I was scrolling through my screen and you couldn't see it. But I was just showing Source Making is a really good site. So, how's everybody doing? Is everyone still awake? Kind of falling asleep? Bored? We are the open source coders. That's what I like to call our community. So, does anyone have an open source repo I can do a quick contribution to? I need to get up I got to keep up my open source contributions. I think last year in the top 500 open source contributors in the world. And the year before that, I trended with Twitter and Facebook on GitHub for open source contributions. So, as we are open source coders, anyone want to, I know you can't paste links in the chat, but paste your username or username/repo, and I know the beginning of the URL for github.com, and I can contribute to your project in front of everyone live. It might not be a big contribution, but it'll be a contribution nonetheless, and that make your project more active and get kind of that workflow going of someone submitting a PR and you reviewing it, either commenting on it and then accepting it after maybe some changes, or just accepting it if it's good first time. It's very rarely good first time, or rejecting it if it's something that you don't want. So don't be shy. Who have we got? Who's been speaking in the chat? I won't call anyone out who hasn't been speaking, but we have got some people in the chat who have been speaking. But do put in your GitHub username. I can take a look and see I can find something. So we've got Jez, Suxi, if I pronounced that correctly, and Fracture, you've also spoken. What's your GitHub? And we can I can do a contribution. Actually, I know that Suxy was doing some open source work. I think your username is Suxy, if I remember correctly. How do I spell it? Where is it? I did see your username. S-U-C, like that. No, okay. I was trying to be smart, it didn't work. I don't think it's case sensitive. No, I could search for you maybe. But yes, I'm keen to do an open source contribution. Don't be shy. I'll welcome some open source contributions to mine. If someone wants to do one for me, I'll gladly help you do a contribution to my Dashboard Hub project that I do most of my open source work at the moment on. If you do want to do a contribution. So I'm struggling to find people. Honestly, don't be shy. Let me do a live contribution. Let me see also what, no takers? Okay, so let me see, what can we do? Aha! Have I found you? Let me share my screen. There's no running. I think this looks like you, right? Hello world, building blocks. Let me do a contribution. So you got some contribution, that's good. You got 16. We're gonna chase you by the end of the week to make sure you make that 20. I'll do a contribution to you so you can kind of practice that that workflow. Let's have a look. Building blocks. JavaScript notes.pdf, and you've got a README. Awesome. Looks good. Self-learning process. Okay. So you've got a README, that's good. I can think of a few things I could add. And you've got a hello world, GitHub creating first repo exercise. Nice. Okay. So which repo is more recent? 6 days ago, 25 days ago. Okay, 6 days ago. We'll contribute to this one. We'll send you a pull request. So what can we find? So you've got a nice table. You've got some information. You've got some links. Okay. What else can we do? So we could do, any suggestions to what contribution we can make? I could, camel case that with a space. It's kind of boring, but at least you'll get to see the workflow. What else could we do? You've got, you used links, you've used bold, you used tables, so all, and you used quotes. So to be continued. I have to code right now. I love it. That's really good. So keep up the coding, and we'll get this. Let's do an edit. Okay. So let's do an edit. So as I hit an edit and use GitHub's UI to do the edit, it will automatically create a fork for me. And I don't know why I'm looking at this camera. I've got one right here. It will automatically do a fork for me, and it says it up here. We've created a fork of this project. And as I make changes, it will submit it into a pull request for the owner to review and comment, accept, reject. So this looks good. So what contribution can we do? Let's see. Okay, I'll just do some simple ones just to show the workflow. I think it's really good that even simple changes, if someone's looking at this and saying, hey, that's such an easy change, any of these simple changes, even tidy up changes, you're welcome to do them to my project, and I will accept them, because these little improvements really add up over time. Imagine if you've got, I don't know, a few people every day or once a week doing little improvements, so many will happen. So I do like a space after this. So I want to put a space. I do like a line break without the space at the end of the line. So what else can we do? To be continued. Double lines there, we don't need that, so I'll remove one. Again, line break there is quite good. And then we'll put these into 2 words, building blocks. And you can also do on GitHub, you can preview the changes. So it shows you what we've done. So it says I've changed this and I've added this. Introduction is spelled incorrectly, so no one noticed that. We're supposed to be pairing on this. I can't, my English is terrible. So as you saw from constructor without an R. Thank you again, Fracture for spotting that. Okay, so if anyone else spots anything else, do let me know, and we'll make the change. that's looking good. Okay, let's preview the changes again. Again, it even shows you not just the whole line, but the specific characters that have changed. I think that's good. I'm not sure what the / at the end is for. But I'll leave it in. That might be some, new hip thing for. Let's call it at the end here as well. But it hasn't got a link on that one. You know what? Let's put a link on that as well. So if we copy that, is it a / to be like an or? But in the second spot, it's also got it without a space. So in the second usage, which I saw was down here. So I'm going to leave it with the /. But do let me know if that's part of the name or not part of the name or just an or. And then the other one was here. So if I paste that in there, again, completion of all the, I might just remove, as it's not the challenge, if I just remove this and just put the actual main repo. Okay. So again, you can see the changes there. Okay, let's propose this. Let's submit it. So I said so again. Damn it, saying that too much. Update README. We can say improved formatting of Markdown. I think it's pretty simple and self-explanatory. All I need to do is hit propose. So no command line involved if you don't want to. I'm a big fan of the command line, but you don't have to. So it's already filled it in for me, and it's already said, okay, so the source repo is Susie building blocks. I'm not going to say the whole name, I'll pronounce it wrong. And it's going to come from Eddie. I can get my name right, I know, but I'm just keeping it short and simple. And it automatically calls it patch 1, it will increment. If you fork it manually and then clone it and all that sort of stuff, you can create the branches, the names you want, and be more specific. So in fact, actually before I hit create, I'm actually going to open a new tab, the issues, and I'm going to log an issue and just say improve. You do realize that creating an issue counts as a contribution. So if you notice a bug or an issue, pardon the pun, I don't mean issue as in creating a GitHub issue, as in a problem with someone's project or typo or anything like that, create an issue because that will count as a contribution. And even if you don't actually fix it yourself, it just makes them aware of it. But if you fix it yourself, it will be creating the issue, it will be doing a commit, it will be raising a PR. That will be like 3 contributions, really, really simple. And then your green tiles will look like more popular, more active, not popular, more active. And it really helps finding jobs as well. So we'll just say improve Markdown formatting in README. I'm just going to hit submit. Okay, I'll leave that open. It's given me the issue number of 2. So when I hit create on this, I will just say closes 2. And the reason why I say closes 2 is because when this gets merged, if it gets merged, Susie, hopefully you like the PR I'm doing and you'll merge it, then it will automatically close the issue as well. So you don't have to do it in 2 steps. The owner can just do it in 1. Again, it shows just before I hit create, it will show the changes or what I changed. I think it looks all right. And we'll hit create. So there is now a pull request. So Susie, you have a pull request and an issue from me. So I hope that's okay. And for anyone else who has joined, we were talking about design patterns before and we were looking into the adapter pattern. Does anyone know any other patterns that could be used or they have used? So some of the popular ones, if I just quickly recap, I'm going to call it a day soon, it's approaching an hour, but some of the popular ones is factory. You might use that a lot. If you've got a class or an object that requires lots of parameters on the constructor, and you don't always need that, you can create a factory that automatically grabs what it needs and creates the object for you and passes it back. It's usually a static call to the factory, but I'm not going to go into that. Object pool is used when, for example, if you're using Node and you're connecting to the database, you'll have a pool of network connections that you can use, and that's usually configurable. Then prototype, Singleton we'll use a lot if you want the same instance back from a class so that it's you get the same data within that class. So you get the state. Adapt we spoke about quite a bit today. So if you have just joined, do go back in the video and watch it. I gave an example, coding example, and made mistakes. Like I said, after 14 years, still making mistakes, and pairing with all of you, it got pointed out. Composite and bridge, I won't go into yet. Decorator I do quite like it, but again, I won't go into that. You don't use it too much. You will use facade and decorator as part of a framework. Composite is more, I'm going to be really bad at explaining this one. Let's see what it says. So composition is rather than inheritance, so you inject the dependency that you need. Let's see if they don't have a good example, do they? No. We'll come back, we'll do a whole talk on that another time, because that is one of my favorites. We also spoke chain of responsibility. Chain of responsibility is used quite a bit as well. Memento is good for keeping a version of an object. So as you kind of change the object, you might want to go back, almost like Git, keeping a version. So we've got some questions. Let's have a look. What's the difference between Singleton and Registry? Oh, good question. Okay, I'm going to call out to the audience to jump in and help. So, Maurice's, thanks for asking the question and thanks for joining. The registry patterns, some frameworks use the registry pattern, and you usually get back the same thing, so it's almost like a singleton. So I actually don't know. I will look that up and probably get back to you, because that's actually a really good question, and I haven't been asked that before, and I haven't come across it, I haven't thought to ask that, I suppose. Registry I haven't used in a long time. I remember registry from Zen Framework and PHP days, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was still a singleton that you got back. It was probably the way that it wrapped it. So with, damn it, I said so again. No one's catching me out on these so's. So yeah, not so. I would have to get back to you on that, but thanks for asking the question. But if anyone else knows the answer, do jump in. I'm sure Benzra or Jez, I know them personally, so I'm pretty sure they know the answer, and there are others probably in the call that also know the answer. Null object pattern is really quite useful, in that rather than having, you can have an object that's got no kind of value or state, and therefore you keep the same type. Observer, with asynchronous coding, you use observer a lot. So if you do Angular 5, it's used a lot. So when something would subscribe to the object, and when something is changed, it would automatically get a notification that something has changed. So that's really useful for real-time, like real-time chat. The chat we're using now is probably using something very similar. What else have we got? Yeah, that's the one they list on source making, and they're kind of the more common ones. If you do want to read a book, do have a look at The Gang of Four. It's a really good book. You'll probably read it more than once, as in kind of every year, just kind of recap and read stuff. But that's basically it. So I had one question which I couldn't really answer, so apologies. If anyone else has any other questions, and before we call the stream a day, do let me know. While you're having a think of your questions, do join. I've got a Discord channel where we can chat between streams, between each other. So do join, and we can chat. The community is called OpenSource Coders, because that's really what I'm really passionate about, and it's really open, and we've got code of conduct, and really inclusive. Just say thanks to I had a couple of follows while I was on this on the streaming, so thank you very much for the follows. And Jez, thank you very much for the subscribe. So that's really cool. Okay, everyone, it's Wednesday. Have a good evening. Get some open source coding done. I wanna check your accounts later on. Make sure you've done some open source coding. And next time when you do come back with your GitHub username. Don't be shy. Username and repo. And I'll gladly make a change or a contribution if you want that activity, or you want to practice that receiving a pull request, of being on the receiving side. If you want to practice sending a pull request, so doing a fork, making a chain, sending a pull request, please feel free to use my project. I'll open it up somewhere here. If the page loads, and I'm not showing my screen, so that's not going to help. Look at all this green. So I'm quite proud of my green. I do want to get it more green. I've got some friends who are around the 4,000 mark, so I need to push that higher up. They keep dropping off the end. I had a couple of days that just dropped off recently that had like 70 or 80 or even 90 kind of contributions on those days. Okay, I was at a hackathon. It was really, just kind of doing small commits. That was kind of a bit silly, but still I lost those. They've dropped off that 12 months rolling window. But what I wanted to show you was this project. It's the project I mostly work on. So it's, if you do want to contribute, please do make a contribution. Anything, if you find a typo, if you find, this image is not up to date, for example, because there is a graph above this now, please take a screenshot and submit a PR, gladly accept it. We actually had a pull request by someone, I think their name was Sneakies with like 2 or 3 Z's at the end, and they submitted this for me, and that was their first pull request, if I remember correctly. So it doesn't have to just be code. I've also got, I need to sort out a documentation directory and get that to deploy into a website, build and deploy onto a website using GitHub Pages, say, for example. But yeah, any contributions are welcome, no matter how small, please do contribute. Have a great evening, everyone. I'm gonna call it a day. I'm probably rambling a lot. But, and also when I go to some events, so I go to lots of events, although I haven't got anything coming up in the next couple of weeks. Would you be interested in me live streaming while being in a hackathon? And you can see how the team collaborates. You can even join in remotely. It doesn't matter what country you're in. It used to be on a Saturday and Sunday, and you could contribute remotely and you could get involved. So let me know if that's something that would be of interest. I'm quite keen to try that. And I could use something like Fluebit, where you could also code with me in my IDE in real time, which is pretty awesome. Right, I'll quickly show you Fluebit, because if you don't know about it, it's actually really useful for pairing with people. So it integrates with your IDE, and it's free if the project's open source. So even does your camera, we just pick Atom. Atom's an IDE that everyone loves. So you install it, and it's really easy. And you can share terminals, you can share your IDE, so both of you can pair on it. And it's you can even have your camera on and all the rest and do stuff like that. So that's actually really good for pairing. I'm actually pairing with someone and live streaming it this Saturday at 12 o'clock. So I actually might use this, just thinking about it. But they could be using Atom and I could be using IntelliJ. It still works the same way. So that's fine. And I was going to say one more thing, and I can't remember what it was. But obviously it wasn't important. Oh yes, I was going to say I'm not streaming tomorrow. My wife is actually taking me out for dinner. She's saying I need to get out of the Batcave, as she calls it. I like to call it as the command center. And she's going to make me go and see the real world. However, she's out tonight. So when I finish the stream, I am actually going to put on that big TV, get myself some dinner. And on that big TV, what am I going to watch? I'm going to go on Twitch. I'm going to find out which one of you is streaming their coding, their open source coding. I'm going to watch and pair with you while I eat my dinner. So yes, thank you again all for joining. I really appreciate your support, and I hope that was useful and interesting. And if you do have any questions or you think of any later on, do ask me in Discord. The link is underneath. Thanks everyone. Well, I have a holding page now as well. I mustn't forget to do that. Bye.